I'm here today with John Noltner, author of a book from Broadleaf Books titled Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. John is a gifted storyteller and photographer who has worked on 4 continents, gathering accounts of human courage, grace, and resilience. His work has appeared in the National Geographic Traveler, Forbes, Midwest Living, and the New York Daily News. His series, A Piece of My Mind, has been produced as 2 award-winning books and 4 exhibits that travel the country for presentations such as the Nobel Peace Prize Forum, Everyday Democracy, the National Civil Rights Museum, and the Gandhi King Conference on Nonviolence. John, his wife Karen, and their dog Bailey have pulled up their anchor from Bloomington, Minnesota, and taken their life on the road full time in search of stories of hope, healing, and transformation. You can learn more about all of John's work at apomm.net. That's APOMM, a piece of my mind.net. So John, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations on all that you've done.
Hey, thanks, Brian. And it's really good to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Well, it was really great to get to know you and learn about your work at Wild Goose because very unique, set of things that you're doing, and I'm anxious to let everyone know about it.
Well, I'm glad to have connected with you there. I'm also glad that it's not quite so hot today as it was when we were at the Goose.
Isn't that the case? So to get started, can you tell us what else you'd like people to know about you than what I briefly touched on?
Oh man, we connections with that. I'm a father. I'm a photographer. I'm a storyteller, and I'm also a Christmas tree farmer. My wife and I have a Christmas tree farm in western Wisconsin. But this project that we're here to talk about, A Piece of My Mind, is really rooted in listening and in storytelling and in using that storytelling to bridge divides and build community. So I'm really excited to talk with you about that today.
Yes, absolutely. It fits very well with all the Healing Divides work that I've been doing too.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I was so excited when I found out about your work. So I mentioned in the intro that you pulled up your anchor. You're on a full-time road trip. Can you talk just a little bit to share with people what that's like?
Yeah, I'm coming to you from our mobile house and office and world headquarters. This is Vinny Van Gogh. And we've been on the road for 2 years now. We sold our house in Bloomington, Minnesota. Our kids were grown. I didn't ever care to mow lawn or rake leaves again in my life. And Karen and I knew that we wanted to shift into some other sort of situation, but we didn't know what yet. So we thought, I was traveling a lot with A Piece of My Mind, and we thought we would just hit the road. And so especially for the last 2 years, we've been traveling the country, interviewing people from all different backgrounds, really trying to amplify voices of folks who are looking for creative solutions to some of our most challenging issues. So we've been down along the border talking about immigration. We've been in Mississippi talking about moving Confederate monuments, really all of the big issues that we're dealing with as a country. And but doing it in a van. And it's the weirdest thing about this shift for us is that it doesn't seem weird. We've always traveled a lot. We have always worked to simplify and sort of shrink our lives a little bit, and so getting rid of stuff was freeing. We gave away or sold most of our stuff. We have a little 300 square foot storage unit where we keep, memories and the kids' paintings from 3rd grade and all of those sorts of things. But we really shed a ton of stuff, and we're finding it freeing. We're finding that it frees us up to be able to go and explore ideas and places that we otherwise couldn't have explored.
Sure. Wow.
I will give you an aside for that and say that we do miss our friends. We know we're not going to do this forever because we again want to be rooted in community where we have the folks we love around us. But for the time being, this is where we belong, and we're having
Mhm.
fun with it.
Well, since we're talking about road trip, do you want to share with folks some of the places you're going to be over the next few months, in case you're coming into someone's town who's listening?
Yeah, yeah, of course. And we're always happy to connect with school groups and service organizations and book clubs as we travel around. Next week we're going to bring an exhibit down to Florida, and then throughout the fall we'll be working our way up north to Maine by the time we get to November or so. And so it's not always a straight line that we travel, but we've got exhibits in Virginia and West Virginia and North Carolina and New York, and we think Maine between now and November. And so what we've done with these stories over time is we've produced 3 books, we've produced 4 traveling exhibits, and we bring these stories, excuse me, we bring these stories around to use in public spaces and to encourage people to have conversations around civic responsibility and social change and basically how we can find a way to live better together.
Mhm. So, before we get into your new book, can you talk a little bit about the other books that you've written and some of your photography work?
Yeah, yeah. So the model for A Piece of My Mind is really simple. We have sat down with people from all different backgrounds, Holocaust survivors and veterans and undocumented immigrants and people who've been through the prison system. And we sit down and we have a recorded conversation, much like what we're doing now. And because I'm a photographer, I also shoot a portrait of them. And so we build these conversations around the question, what does peace mean to you?
Mm.
How do you work towards it in your life? What are some of the obstacles you encounter along the way? And so the first book that we produced was all stories from Minnesota. Uh, it's got a larger worldview than that because of who the people are, but basically a portrait, a little biography of the person, and then an excerpt from their interview. 52 people, all from Minnesota in that book. The second book is called A Piece of My Mind, American Stories, and that was a 40,000 mile road trip across the United States.
Wow.
Also the same format, interview on one side, portrait on the other side, all trying to rediscover the beauty and wisdom that's all around us,
Hmm.
if we take the time to see it. So those first 2 books were really fundamentally about sharing other people's stories.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have a journalism background. My goal was to quiet my voice as much as possible, to take my filter out of the equation and simply amplify the stories and voices of other people.
Very cool. Very cool. So as I mentioned, the title of the new book is Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. How did that one come about?
Well, so after 10 years of sharing other people's stories, I finally figured out that I had something to say as well. I had something to share about encountering difference and about challenging my own expectations, about recognizing my own blind spots, and about what it meant to be a better ally in the world. This will come as no surprise to anybody who's watching, but I'm a middle-aged white guy from the Midwest in the United States, and I'm the poster child of privilege, and the question for myself always is, what am I going to do with that privilege? And my goal with this project has been to continually challenge that, to reflect on that, but to use that privilege as a platform for amplifying other voices. And so as we travel the country, I regularly enter into communities where I don't have a full understanding of the issues. I
Mhm.
have an interest and I have a passion for exploring this common humanity that we all share. But I to do. And so part of my process, nobody owes me that education, but where people are interested in sharing their experience, where people are interested in having a conversation of the challenges and the victories and the joys that they have in life, I'm really interested in sharing that with people. And so that's what we do as we travel the country.
Hmm. Hmm. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about kind of what different types of risks, you've taken in pursuing all of this and why you've been willing to do that.
Mm. Yeah, that's risks. We can talk about that in a couple of ways. I mean, we can talk about the financial risk. I started this project as a freelance photographer back when the economy handed me some free time. You
Mm,
know, the recession of 2019 um, hit the world of freelance photography pretty hard and pretty fast. And there was no certainty that this was ever going to turn into something.
mhm,
This was
mhm.
just a small little personal project I was doing out of my own curiosity at first. Um, so we took some financial risk as we went. Driving 40,000 miles across the country is not free.
Really?
Gas prices were about what they are now. Um, and so it took some time. There was some career risk because I was walking away from some of my paying assignments. Some of those things were never going to come back because I was not paying attention to them. I was focused on this new thing. Um, and then you just talk about artistic and even human risks. There are a couple of times in my experience where I've pulled up for an interview and I've texted my wife when I was traveling alone, and I said, "Hey, just so you know, here's the address where I'm going to be, uh, just in case I don't come back out again." That that has never happened. We have encountered nothing but the kindness of strangers. The goodness of people on the road. You know, I wanted to do some aerial photography, and I met a guy in a bar over a couple of beers who said, "Oh, I just got my pilot license. I'll take you up." And I don't think your pilot over beers in a bar is necessarily the wisest thing to do. So there could be risk involved with that. I interviewed a shrimp boat captain, and he said, tomorrow shrimping season starts on the Gulf of Mexico. I'll take you out overnight if you want to go out shrimping. Yeah, and I had known the guy for all of 60 minutes at that point, but I said that sounds good to me. So
Oh, cool.
I don't know, some people might consider that risk, but I consider it opportunity,
Hmm, hmm.
to connect with people. And frankly, I've never been disappointed. We have encountered good people and kind generosity everywhere that we've traveled.
So how did you realize that this was what you wanted to do? That this was the dream you wanted to pursue?
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, as a freelance photographer, I was, like you said in the intro, I was shooting for national magazines and Fortune 500 companies, and I would be photographing, barge captains on one day, and I'd be photographing neurosurgeons the next. I found joy in all of it. I loved that variety and I loved that diversity. Back around 2008 or nine, I was frustrated with the quality of our national dialogue. I was concerned about all the things that ask us to look at what can separate us. And I mean, that's child's play compared to what's going on now.
Yeah.
But I wondered if there was something I could do with my photography and storytelling to remember what connects us, something that could amplify and rediscover that beauty and wisdom that we all have. And so, literally, I was trying my own soul. Like I was so frustrated with the angry voices. I just wanted to do an interview with somebody around this idea of peace, and that was interesting. So I did another one. And that was interesting. So I did another one. And pretty soon I had a dozen stories. Pretty soon I had 50 stories, and it just started growing these legs. And as it turned into this bigger body of work, I started understanding ways that we could use these stories to have public conversations.
Hmm,
I didn't just want an exhibit.
mhm.
That's sort of a passive process. I wanted to use it to start conversations, to be in community with people. And so very slowly we started seeing these different ways that we could plug into conferences and colleges and community centers and faith communities. One of those things is what you saw and what you participated in at Wild Goose, where we'll set up a studio and we'll ask people a question and have them respond in 25 words or less. And, over the course of 2 days, we gathered 95 responses from Wild Goose. And that then we can share back to the community and help them see them and their peers in new ways. So this is an ever evolving process as we figure out how to invite people to talk about what's close to their hearts, and then how to use those stories to connect one another and reweave some of that social fabric, reweave some of that social trust that has been frayed over these last years and decades in our society.
Wow. Well, over the years, I've read lots of different business books. And, there's one that's talks about blue oceans and red oceans, kind of like where blue oceans are markets that don't exist yet, and red oceans are all the markets that do exist. And most companies only play in the red oceans, competing against each other and everything. But, they talk about different companies that basically found their blue ocean, some new space in the market that didn't exist before. And so what you're doing strikes me in that vein. And then also, a lot of folks have talked about the increasing value of experiences in people's lives, more so than has been, the case historically. And again, you've invented a new experience for people. And so I just love the kind of the business creativity, but also the altruism, of what you're doing. So it's just really fascinating and impressive to see what you've done.
Well, altruism, except sometimes I feel like it's really greedy because I get so much out of this process. Like I am fed by having these conversations with people. I'm fed by encountering difference, and that sustains me. So yeah, maybe it's altruistic, but maybe it's self-serving because I get so much joy out of the process.
I can relate to that too, because of all these interviews that I do. I just enjoy them so tremendously. I learn so much.
Yeah, right.
So I'd like to read from a couple of endorsements for the book. This one's from Parker Palmer. He says, Portraits of Peace gives us a chance to correct the lenses through which we look at others and get back in touch with our shared humanity. So how would you say that what you're doing serves to correct the lenses?
Oh, that's interesting. And by the way, I just traded messages with Parker Palmer. He continues to astound me with the work he does in the world.
Yes.
He's a good guy, and I'm lucky to be connected to him. Corrects the lenses. I think that we all go into the world with certain expectations. I mean, here's how I should say it as a photographer, really. Sometimes I look at a scene, and with the lens I have on, it doesn't quite work. But if I change my lens, if I change that perspective and the way I'm looking at it, the scene is the same thing, but my understanding of the scene changes. So maybe as a photographer, that's my best analogy, that sometimes we need to look at the world or a situation in a new way. And I think that this kind of storytelling can do that. We might go into a conversation expectations of who they are, be it good, bad, or otherwise. But if we open ourselves up to that kind of listening, we can start to understand a new way of seeing them. We can start to understand that some of those preconceptions were not fair, were not accurate, were not grounded in any sort of reality. And so I think for me, changing that lens gives us an opportunity to see that thing in a new way.
So here's another blurb from Padraig Otwama. He says, John Noltner knows three things about stories. People have them, people need to be heard, people need to listen. So how would you say that you're so good at getting people to tell their stories?
Padraig, by the way, is a wonderful poet from the north of Ireland. And if you get a chance, he's got a podcast now on NPR. If you get a
Yeah.
chance to listen to it, it's a joy to read his writing, but to hear him say it in his lyrical voice is beautiful as well. Um, I don't I do works other than um, I'm genuinely curious about people, and I think that curiosity comes through. And I'm not entering into conversation with an agenda. I'm not entering into conversation to try to prove a point or to try to tell you you're wrong. Um, Entering into conversation because I'm curious and I want to understand. And I think early in my career, I was afraid to ask some difficult questions.
Mm.
Like I would think of an idea but I would back away from it because I thought, ooh, that's too hard to ask somebody that I barely know. But over the years, through doing this so frequently, I've come to realize that we really can talk about anything, that there are gentle ways to enter into conversation with people that show respect, that are housed in integrity and genuine curiosity. And when that's the case, and when we're gentle with one another, I think we can really uh, explore a lot of things together.
Mm. Very cool. I like the idea that, you convey that you don't have an agenda going into the conversation. I think that's really important. So,
Well, and let me
yeah, go ahead.
clarify that, Brian, that doesn't mean I don't have an opinion, because I have some really strong opinions about a lot of things. But I also don't need to that I'm right. I also don't need to beat you up over thinking that you're wrong. And so I think if we enter into that sort of honest dialogue, I can say, well, here's been my experience. If yours is different, help me understand that. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by that? And those are inviting questions. Those are not let me beat you up and win this conversation sort of questions. When we play that, we create defensiveness and the opportunity for real learning and connection goes away.
So, what would be like the one thing that you'd like people to most take away from the book?
Oh man. I usually ask people what their favorite part of the book was. That's my game, but I guess I'm going to give you a two-part answer. That gives me extra space. I want people to challenge their existing expectations, and I want people to commit to staying at the table. Right? We don't have to solve all of this today. We can expect and accept non-resolution as we build community and agree to stay connected. I think those are my two takeaways. Be willing to challenge your own expectations, be willing to stay at the table and stay connected.
Cool. So, I know you're going to be traveling, but do you have any new book projects or anything on the horizon that you're able to talk about?
Yeah, I think my next book is going to be rooted in these last 2 years. Really, the beginning of this journey on the road started when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. That I went and did some storytelling around that at the intersection of 38th and Chicago. That helped us understand that we could still do interviews, we could still do programming even in the midst of a pandemic. And so that's when we decided to leave. And so in these last 2 years of learning how to live on the road, learning how to walk into some of these really difficult conversations about around race and immigration and housing security and trauma in our country. There will be a book out of these last 2 years. It's going to be focused on living small ideas, letting go of stuff so that you can enter into the I tell you when that's going to be written or when it's going to be released, but it's the next goal. In the meantime, our programming for A Piece of My Mind really was shut down for the pandemic, bringing exhibits around, doing workshops, and that is just waking up again now that people are willing to plan ahead, that they're willing to plan these events on their campuses or in their conferences. And so really our next year is going to be spent responding to that and saying yes to every opportunity to use these existing stories to build public dialogue and to try to reweave some of the social fabric in our country that needs a little bit of attention right now.
So I assume if people go to your website, apomm.net, that they can find the specific dates and cities where you're going to be?
Yeah. There is an events page, and that will tell you both where we've been in the past and what's upcoming. Pretty sure it's updated. It's pretty updated. And then also on there's a page for programming that talks about the ways we engage with schools and communities and faith organizations. And then there's a contact page where people can send me a note if they want to learn more, if they want to explore some ideas about what might be possible in their communities. I always say that we walk through the doors that are open to us. And so a lot of times these happy surprises fall in our laps of people who want to have these really important conversations in their organization or in their community, and they see this as a tool to be able to do that.
Very good. Very good. Well, again, the name of the book is Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. John, thanks so much for joining us and sharing this amazing journey that you're on.
Yeah, it's really good to talk with you, Brian. Thanks for taking the time.